Hello.
I'm Councillor Tony Jones. If you don't know me, I'm your chair for the year, hopefully. I've got to go through some formula we have to say to people ourselves. So if I go through that with you, and then we can start the meeting properly. As I'm Councillor Tony Jones, I'm chairing for the Scrutiny Committee, and I would like to welcome everybody to the meeting, which is being held virtually in accordance with the council rules for virtual meetings. Meetings is being streamed live on YouTube and also be available for viewing the meeting as it finishes. Councillors who sit on this committee are identified by name on the screen. Councillors are reminded that although this meeting is being held remotely, they are regarded as being present in a meeting of the council, and they should observe the natural rules of behaviour under the members' code of conduct and not allow members of the household to distract them during the course of the meeting, which is sometimes pretty difficult, but I'm sure we'll do our best. Members are reminded that if they switch off the video link or move away from the screen, they will be treated as leaving the meeting and will not be able to take part in any votes taken on the item under discussion. Members can identify their wishes to speak by raising their hand and should only speak when I, as chair, will invite you to do so. Councillors should declare that they are leaving the meeting and switch off their video link if they have any disclosable pecuniary interests or other personal items in an item on the agenda. Councillors can switch on their video link when I call the next agenda. Hopefully we will not have any IT problems, but can I remind councillors that if their connection is lost, they should immediately advise democratic support officers and use their meeting link to access the meeting again. I hope that made sense. Right, so I will open the meeting, and the first item is apologies for absence and substitutions. Have we got any?
No, there have been no apologies, Chair.
Thank you. Item 2 is the appointment of vice chairs. Have we got any nominations? Sorry, Councillor Carruthers.
I'm not able to nominate myself, am I? Can I nominate myself?
No.
Perhaps Councillor
Faulkner would like to nominate you.
I would be delighted to nominate Kerry Carruthers as vice chair.
Have we got a seconder? Yeah, we've got a seconder. Councillor Abigail Compton Bennett. Sorry, your name doesn't come right across the screen on that one, so you keep me guessing. Are we all in favour? Yep. Well, I need another vice chair from the opposition. So is there a name going forward? I would like to nominate Ian Tilbury if possible.
I'll second that.
If he wishes to stand, I haven't asked him, so. Who was the seconder? Sorry. Councillor Faulkner. Are you happy, Ian, to stand?
Mute myself. So happy to do that, Tony. It'd be a bit of continuity because I've sort of done it. It's only comes up if there's a call in anyway. So
everybody in favour? Agreed? All agreed? Yes. Yeah. Lovely, thank you. Item 3, declaration of interests. Has anybody got any declaration of interests on any of the papers? No, we haven't got a lot on there tonight. No? Okay. Urgent matters, we have none. Minutes of meeting held on the 23rd of March. Are we in agreement, or is there anything that needs to be brought up I was not on that committee, so I cannot say, but anybody who was, is there anything that needs to be brought up or talked about? No, all agreed? Yeah. Appointments for the performance panel. I don't know how many we're having. 5. Have we got 5 names going forward for this? And if you'd like to give them, right, see some, can you please indicate, because it's very awkward with these iPad things.
So, sorry, Tony, I can't, for some reason, I can't raise my hand tonight, but
So just give me a wave, Carolyn.
Yeah, do they have to be people on the committee or not? Because we're not sure.
No, it doesn't.
Okay. Yeah, I did put a WhatsApp message out to our group today, hoping I'd get a response, but nobody's come forward. So I don't know what to suggest from the Labour group, but I'm happy to do it if. But I don't know.
My suggestion would be that put your name forward, and if someone else wishes to do it, we can bring that back to the next committee meeting.
We can always change it at full council, can't we?
Yes,
Yeah.
If they speak to their groups, and then obviously they can contact Democratic Services to put it forward, and then we can ratify it at the next meeting.
All right. Yeah, if you can all talk to your groups and get names and put it through to Democratic Services, we can get it ready for the next meeting. That may be the easier option, if that's, unless you've got people who want to go on it now, say so, but that may be the best option. Do you agree with that? Yep. Right. Where were we? That was item 5. That's item 6 or 5. Right. I'll put it over to Sue Curzon now, who's going to open on item 7, year end in 2001 key indicator performance management report.
Good evening, members. Yeah, I'm just going to introduce the style report we're going to go through this evening, and then the Dean Kennedy is the officer that will take you through the report and answer any questions that you may have. So what we would normally do is this information wouldn't come to scrutiny. We would normally go to performance panel to be reviewed on behalf of the scrutiny committee, and the chair of the performance panel would then normally take the committee through a summary position and any feedback from the performance panel. But performance panel haven't met for the last year, and obviously, as you've just alluded to, we've got to actually appoint the new panel going forward. Therefore, you're seeing the full report. What I would say is that this is a completely different style of report to previously reported. We're now looking at doing a dashboard and commentary linked to that dashboard. If any of you remember the previous pack, it was quite weighty. And actually, sometimes, some of the feedback that we had was that members found it difficult to kind of disseminate it down to the key bits of information and the key facts. So we would welcome any feedback in terms of the style and the format that we're using. And this, alongside the major projects, will go to performance panel and then be reported back to scrutiny. So I'm going to hand you over to Nadine, who will take you through the key elements of the report, and then obviously we can answer any questions for you.
Good evening, and thank you, Sue. Performance measures detailed in the priority action plans were actually agreed in February of 2021. However, for comparison purposes, the Q4 position presented to you tonight has been reported using the same measures that we used for Q2 reporting. We're reporting on 52 measures for the end of year 2021, with 25 at a green status, 4 at amber, 17 at red. There are also 6 that you'll see that do not have a RAG status, as they were provided for either contextual purposes or the data is not yet available. Of the 17 reporting as red, it should be noted that 9 of these relate to facilities or services that were not in operation for a significant part of the year due to the pandemic. These have been highlighted on the scorecard at Appendix 1 on the scorecard in grey for your use. Within the strengthening communities priority, the pandemic significantly impacted on the usual activities within our community buildings. Where possible, organisations adapted to providing their cultural engagement via digital means or by offering outdoor activities where possible. The Basingstoke and Dean Health Plan has also been affected by the pandemic. However, Continuum have now been commissioned to work with us to support this work required, and it's anticipated that a health and wellbeing strategy and action plan will be adopted later in 21-22. The measures reported within protecting and enhancing our environment are all on target. The Council's carbon footprint has reduced based on a like-for-like comparison to the previous year, mainly due to the reduced occupation of the Dean's building and lower emissions from the waste contract and operational fleet. The introduction of highway verges in Hatchwarren and Beggarwood have significantly increased the council open spaces managed for biodiversity interest. And also the level of dropped street litter has decreased by over 3% when compared to the end of 1920. However, it should be noted that this is also likely due to the pandemic. Within improving safety, all measures are reporting on target. The community support team have been proactively working within the community to reduce antisocial behaviour, which has had a positive impact with residents reporting they feel safer and consider their areas to have improved cleanliness. The team have also been supporting the community hub, the opening of the fire station vaccination centre and the surge testing that was carried out in Bramley. It is also reported that there have been no households with children in bed and breakfast accommodation for more than 6 weeks. In addition, we continue to have no placements of vulnerable homeless 16 to 17-year-olds in bed and breakfast and have exceeded the target on placements into the private rented sector. The planning for the future priority also reports many significant achievements when you consider the conditions we have faced over the last year. During Q3 and Q4, the planning service received a high number of large and complicated major applications, which absorbed resources and impacted on the speed of decision making on minor and other applications. To resolve this issue and to help manage workloads in 21-22, the planning team are looking to recruit additional planning officers. Relevant providers have recorded 383 completions of affordable homes. However, this should be noted as an unofficial position until agreed with Hampshire County Council. And nearly half of the completions were achieved during Q4. With regards to apprenticeships, the target of 2.3% is set by central government, and since its introduction, the framework surrounding apprenticeships has changed. It will now take a minimum of 2 years to complete rather than the historical 12 months. The pandemic also meant that recruitment activity was on hold for a period of time. And of the 7 apprenticeships that did start within 2021, 6 started during the last 2 quarters. Due to the changes to the framework and by the very nature of the target, it is actually very difficult to achieve. The measure relates to new apprenticeships starting within the past 12 months and therefore takes no account of those that are already in progress. Within the Fit for the Future priority, it should be noted that some of the figures reported may be subject to change following the audit of our accounts. The return on our Treasury management portfolio is lower than achieved in 1920. However, it is higher at 1.65% than the forecasted 1.57%, and this was as a result of reduced interest rates. We also retained higher levels of cash due to the uncertainty of income relating to the pandemic. And the pandemic did impact on our level of income. However, we did receive numerous government grants to help support the council and the community through that period. Collection rates of sundry debt, council tax and property are just outside of target, primarily impacted by the pandemic and the use of rent holidays, changes to instalments and adjustments to the recovery timetable. In addition, workloads increased for many of our teams within the council due to the pandemic, and this also had a significant impact on our ability to respond to all complaints within 10 working days. Turnover of staff and sickness absence are both below target, and this is also likely to be as a direct result of the pandemic due to uncertainty in the labour market and much of the organisation working from home during the year, resulting in improved work-life balance and a reduction in colds, coughs and flu, which would normally circulate in an office environment. That concludes my overview, Chair. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Right, I'm going to open it up to questions. Anybody got any questions for the Dean? I'm looking. Have you got any? I'd like to ask a question. I don't know whether it is actually relevant, so tell me if it isn't. Just with the bed and breakfast thing, I know do we know how many of those people we did put in bed and breakfast were in Basingstoke and not outside of Basingstoke, i.e. Slough we used to send them? Do we have that information, or is that not part of this thing?
No, it's not part of this thing, so we can ask the question for you.
So it's not part, I've just been told it's not part of this, so forget that question. Is there any question, anybody else wish to ask any questions? Oh, sorry. Councillor Abigail Crompton. I forgot. I've got B.
Thank you. I was looking on page 11 and there seem to be a number of different community initiatives which are all run separately. And I would add to this one or two that aren't there, which is the place shaping and the community delivery strategy. And I think it would be really helpful if we could bring all of these community initiatives together and coordinate them, because at the moment there's probably quite a lot of overlap and a few gaps. And I'm wondering whether it's the sort of thing that we could send to the CEP committee.
Hoping that we don't get a huge echo. One second.
Which one?
Sorry, we're in the same room. In terms of the indicators that we have, in terms of performance indicators, going forward, we will be using the indicators that are on the priority plans that were approved by council. So obviously, in terms of the sub-priorities of each of the priority plans, a number of those initiatives are brought together and will be monitored as such, linked to those indicators. The question around a number of community initiatives and whether that should go to CEP is probably not linked to this particular performance report. I think that's a different request.
Where would be the best place to take the request?
Is that okay, Councillor Crompton?
Yeah, I'd just love to know where I should take that request, because I feel quite strongly it would be quite helpful, given that people are doing lots of work and it'd be nice to bring them all together. So where's a sensible place to take it?
Can you actually hear me? Sorry. Yeah. So I would suggest it's so the community strategy, which is picking up all of those items. There are future papers coming on that particular issue, and it will go through CEP as part of their normal work programme. If you have a specific issue, I would suggest perhaps talking to the portfolio holder and actually understanding what the current work programme is, and then if it's appropriate to put it on the CEP as a separate item.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Waldridge.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I've got a few questions actually, but if I start with a general question, who is it who decides what these KPIs are? Because well, as I go through the report and my questions, there's a couple where I think maybe need sections where it'd be more appropriate to have other KPIs rather than the ones we've got, bearing in mind COVID and the situation economically that we're in. So that's my first question: who decides them, and are they open to change? But if I go through them section by section, my first question is on improving safety. Whilst it's noted there that antisocial behaviours come down in the borough, and that's being reported by Nadine. So thank you, Nadine, and it's good to see you, by the way. It also notes that in some areas, some types of antisocial behaviour have increased. So I'd like to know a little bit more about what those types of antisocial behaviour are and what's being done about it. Are they COVID related or are they something else? So that's my first question. My second question is, more about the bed and breakfast figures are good, as they have been for many years. So that's really good to see, again, especially during COVID. But I guess my question is, are these the most relevant KPIs to have now we're coming out of the pandemic? Because I'm mindful of, for example, nationally, the number of families who are affected by the benefit cap are on the increase across the country. So wouldn't it be a good idea to have a KPI about how many of our borough's residents have been affected by the benefit cap? Because that's going to hit a lot of our families, and it would be good to collect that KPI. And also in terms of that, now the eviction ban has been lifted, how many are evictions going up in the borough? And I think that would be a really good KPI to capture. So that's my question there, and that links to my very first question. And then moving on to planning for the future, it's good to see the figures about affordable housing, but as a lot of us know, affordable housing isn't always affordable for the people on the waiting list. So I would like to see a KPI on how much social rented we are developing each year. And it'd be nice to have a KPI where it increases year on year and have a target for that. So they're my questions for now. I think we've covered the one about complaints going over 10 days, and you've given an explanation to that. So thank you for that. So thank you.
Switching back on again. So if I can just pick up the first point in terms of who decides on what the KPIs are. So as we've explained, the current KPIs that are reported in this report are the very last ones of the previous KPIs, which were obviously reported to and discussed with the previous performance panel. So council obviously approved the priority plans, which have the number of KPIs in them, which we'll be reporting going forward. They are live documents. So there is always an opportunity to look at the KPIs that we're reporting, because obviously they need to be meaningful in terms of, are we achieving the outcomes of the council plan? So I would suggest that there's an opportunity to discuss those at performance panel in terms of whether the members find that the KPIs that are being monitored, so the new ones, are they fit for purpose? So once you have that sort of first view of those, and obviously I can circulate the link to the KPI, to the priority plans, so that you can see what the current KPIs are that are going to be monitored. And obviously we can have that discussion at performance panel, and obviously then feedback that back to the individual services to get an overall view for you. So they are a live document, and obviously we want to make them meaningful to the reader and the recipient of the information. And going forward, this information will also be made public, whereas in the past it hasn't. Obviously we want to be able to actually report how we are achieving against priority plans. So in terms of the ones that you've raised, in terms of the increase in antisocial behaviour and what are these, we'll have to take that away and get you a written response to that, Councillor Aldridge. But in terms of the other KPIs that you've mentioned about B&Bs and obviously the benefit cap, etc., they're all really important in terms of the economic recovery KPIs that we need to incorporate as well. So we can take those on board and pass that information back, but certainly pick that up as part of the ongoing conversation. And obviously in terms of the timescale around the complaints, a number of the additional complaints that we had were around council tax, business rates, business rate grants, etc. So to be fair, you know, the sheer volume that was going through the same teams that were trying to also get the business rate grants out, deal with the increase in housing benefit inquiries, etc. It just meant that we just did not have the capability. So we had holding messages, but it did mean that we weren't always able to respond to all of those complaints within 10 working days.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Is there any more questions, or do we want to debate this at all, or are we noting it? Oh, sorry, Councillor Faulkner. Oh, so I'm looking around the room.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah,
used
thank
to
you, Chair.
this sort of thing.
It's a simple one on page 14. What is the bid levy and what is the bid board that's being abolished?
So this is the bid that's actually was part of in the borough, and so obviously all the local businesses, the business improvement district, would have voted as to whether we should have a bid or not, and obviously that was in place, and it was up for a new vote last year, and the bid was ultimately abolished because the businesses in the borough didn't vote for it. So basically the bid board and the bid has actually been disbanded, but obviously as part of the bid there was a levy on each business linked to their business rates in terms of being part of the bid, and all businesses had to pay it. Going forward there isn't a bid levy because there isn't a bid anymore.
Is there any more questions? Oh, Ian.
Oh, yeah, I think well, basically on the bid, I think the interesting fact is that in the KPI really refers to how much of the levy was actually collected, is whether that was working, not whether the bid was any good. I mean, all we know is that, they put Rebecca Bean on the board and they decided to close the bid down, which I thought was quite an interesting state of affairs. But we've never had any real feedback from this. I mean, we used to have a top of the town panel some years ago, which I was on. And then, of course, we lost the top of the town officer who skedaddled off to Winchester. And that he doesn't seem to have been replaced. Nothing seemed to have happened with this. We had the bid, which was quite a nice idea, but we've never had any feedback as to what were the issues, why they decided to shut it down. Clearly, they thought it was a waste of time. But I think the real question is what are we going to do instead now? We really need to be looking at that rather than looking at the KPI. Oh, we collected all the money, okay, but the organisation's failed, isn't it? It's like the old one, the operation was a complete success, but the patient died, basically. It's been a bit of a disaster, really, the whole concept. And we need to understand why that is. We're there to help the top of town shopkeepers and the ones running that, because they've had a pretty hard time over not just the last 2 years, quite a long time. The area is becoming quite run down, but we need to understand what we can do to help them. And the KPIs, this is a very good example of a KPI, which tells us nothing other than the fact that we were collecting the money from them. And I think part of that was a problem. They seemed to, they were paying the money and they didn't seem to be getting anything for it. So I think that would be useful to look at in future. KPI is what did the bid actually do? Well, I think that, again, that could be a subject for scrutiny. Why did it fail? Well, ultimately. Thank you, Chair.
So obviously, from a scrutiny point of view, the bid isn't actually a council function. We have a legal requirement to levy the bills again and act as a collecting agent for the bid levy, but obviously it's not a council function. So obviously, from our point of view, this is just about whether our collection process is working, etc., linked to our business rates, which is why that's the KPI. Clearly, going forward, there won't be any KPIs related to that particular issue because there isn't a bid going forward. And I think there is a separate issue in terms of the town centre regeneration, economic recovery, etc., which I think you're absolutely right. We need to review what the appropriate KPIs are for those particular services. But as I say, in relation to the bid, it's not a function that we provide. And in terms of the reason for it being disbanded, obviously, it is up to all the businesses of the borough to vote as to whether they wish to be part of a business improvement district. And obviously, they have voted not
to. Councillor Compton Burnett. I've got it right.
Thank you. I have a few questions, and please forgive me if this is the wrong place to ask them, but if I don't ask them, I'll never know. So here goes. Sorry. With the, so page 10, when we're talking about the community buildings and the sports facilities, I understand that they were knocked in the pandemic. Is this the place where we can ask, what are we doing to help them back on their feet again?
So you can, so obviously when we come onto the work programme, you can obviously make suggestions through the work programme process, but obviously you need to articulate what it is you want to scrutinise, because obviously if it's more about forward looking and can we have an update, that may well be more appropriate for one of the other committees. But if there's a specific thing that you wish to scrutinise, you can actually put that on the work programme and submit a work programme item.
Okay, and clarification, page 12, it says, so it's para 3.3.2, the community hub. What is the community hub, please?
So the community hub was created through the pandemic. That was the, obviously they were created across the entire country.
That's the plural, it's all of the different ones.
Effectively the triage and the lifeline for a variety of different things. That might have been shopping, it might have been prescriptions, it might have just been, you know, someone to have a conversation with. So that was the community hub.
Okay, so that was a Basingstoke and Dean function to receive questions from people saying, I need help, can you point me in the right direction?
Hello? Are we live? Which one? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
No, nobody?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah,
Have you,
loud and clear, loud and clear.
Councillor Compton, but have you got another question, or is that
Yeah, and
gone silent? I can't
oh,
hear you.
sorry, I wasn't sure whether Sue was asking about the.
Can't hear you from this end.
Oh, okay. Okay, well, I'll just say the last one. If anyone can hear me, that's great. I understand that there was a considerable.
Sorry, there's Councillor Mama Mullally.
Chair, Councillor Compton Burnett was talking just now.
We can hear her.
Okay, the last question I've got is that there was a significant underspend for children and young people and families during the pandemic because the services were reduced. And I was just looking at the Fit for the Future and wondering, with the government grants, etc., to support the community, do we have any, is this an opportunity to look at how they're going to be spent to address that underspend, you know, and that do we ring fence that money for those guys? And if so, what are we going to do with it?
Sorry, are you able to re-articulate that question? So what underspend are you referring to?
So
council's underspend.
Sorry, actually, it's more about the government grants that have been received.
Yeah.
And some of them will have on page 15, and some of them will have been for children and young adults, etc., for whom there was an underspend during the pandemic. And is this the forum for asking how those are going to be used?
So the grants that we received weren't for children and young adults. They may possibly have been the county ones.
Okay,
the grants that we've underspent on are more to do with business grants, etc. And some of the, there are some more generic ones which we will have plans to spend in the current year, but the ones that affected children and young adults were actually predominantly county functions, and they held the funding for it.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Mama Mullally.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Hope you can hear me. I think I can hear echo.
Can you hear me? Yeah, yeah, we can hear you.
All right. This is on 3.2, protecting and enhancing our environment. Sorry, Is it the one? No, no, no. That's sorry. It is not. No, yeah, it is about. Yeah, it is about the activities on. Okay, I lost the page where I wrote it.
Take your time. It's no rush. It's not easy on this web thing.
It is about the antisocial behavior and the 3.3, and it says that following a proactive approach, that is 3.3.2, second bullet point, following proactive approach to supporting residents to feel safer, reduce antisocial behavior and help improve cleanliness of their areas. 87.2% of the residents reporting antisocial behavior feel that their quality of has improved, but that is not stacking up with police reports that are being showing on the police website right now. So I'm just wondering, where did we get this 87.2% data?
Sorry.
So that was from our resident survey. So we actually did a full resident survey, and that was the results in terms of at that point in time. But obviously that was that activity was finalised just before sort of COVID really hit. So that might not necessarily be representative of how people are feeling post-COVID, but that was from the actual resident survey.
All right. So in one of the other sections that said that we couldn't really do the survey because of the COVID, and here we are using the previous data. So I'm just finding out in which area that you were saying that there is no measurements has happened because of the COVID situation. I'm looking for the other point where it says that there is no survey data available for this. And for this instance, we got the survey. That means it is representing prior to 2020 March data then.
So this is
The COVID has happened before.
So this is the relevant data that we have at the point in terms of reporting these. So it's for any information that we've had during the year, but obviously it includes the resident survey. So obviously the next view will be in terms of what the next update brings us. This is the latest information that's available.
So when did this survey happen exactly? Is there an idea?
So the resident survey was, I think we had the results just before the pandemic. But we obviously reported them in May and June last year, which was still part of this monitoring year.
Okay. Sorry, I'm lost anyway. Okay, that's fine. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Is there any more questions or any more debate or about this? Or we just got, are we, and just to note, are we happy to note the report? Agreed? Agreed. Just thank Nadine for her contribution and everything else, and hope to see you again. Thank you. Item 8, the review of the works programme. I believe Councillor Walter has put something in. Is that correct? Is there anything else anybody else would like to look at during the year? We've got, so we can look at some items. A lot of things are coming up. In September, we're looking at the housing strategy. I brought that forward. I'm obviously still talking to officers to see what is going on other fronts, but is there something pressing? This is not, I want to put this across to all councillors. It's not we're not looking to cause problems here, but the way what I hope we get out of this committee is, so if we look at things in the right way, it'll help the borough and also the portfolio holder, because my view on this cabinet system is not a good one, I'm afraid, but they, not the personal cabinet people, but they're making decisions, and sometimes it needs to be a lot broader. So I like this committee to think of something that we can help make the borough a lot better. It might be something small in your ward, and it might actually help everybody across all the wards. We've got, but we'll be looking at over the next couple of meetings, but next meeting we would have more to come forward. Carolyn, you've got your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. There are a couple of things. I didn't want to be greedy tonight and put too many forward because I obviously already put one forward. But there are a couple that certainly issues that are prevalent in our group at the moment in terms of Serco's performance. And we you know, on the WhatsApp today, the various councillors have been discussing that. So I'd like to, if possible, see. We've had Serco and the waste contract come to scrutiny before, about 2 years ago, but I think it'd be very timely to have another report on Serco's performance and how that waste contract is going. So that'd be one idea I would put forward. And another one would be following the full council meeting last Thursday, I think Councillor Gavin James sent an email to Andrea. It's Andrea Rams committee, I think she is, isn't she? Yeah, I was hoping you were going to take up Gavin's idea, because I think that's a very good idea to look at social housing provision in this borough and really get to the bottom of what is being developed, because, you know, I didn't entirely agree with all that was being said from Tristan at the other side of the room. So, but I didn't want to stamp on your toes, so I was hoping that you were going to bring that forward. But so I'd be interested in your comments on that if you're happy to respond.
So if I may.
Sure.
Yeah. So if I may, if you can submit the appropriate work programme form, because obviously it's important to articulate what it is exactly that you want to scrutinise. So it's not about bringing a generic activity. It's actually what is it specifically, whether it's policy related or whether it's performance related. What is it you specifically want officers to bring information on for you to discuss and debate, and how, obviously, from looking at that, the whole point of that is then to make recommendations in terms of improvements or recommendations to the portfolio holder. So if you can actually articulate what it is that you specifically want to have a look at through the work programme, then obviously as a committee, you can then agree to bring that forward on your work programme.
What's the paper I brought earlier today of the right level of detail? Is that the sort of thing? I don't know if you've seen it yet, Sue, or not.
Carolyn?
Yeah.
Did you want to come back on that?
Yeah, I was just going to. I was going to say, is that the right level of detail that I put forward on the paper today? For first question, and the second one is to Andrea. Really, if you want to work with me on that, I'm happy to.
Yeah, I'd love to
do it outside the meeting, and we can really get a detailed thing together on that, if you like. So
I'd love to. Yeah.
Yeah.
Carolyn, the director hasn't looked at that paper that you put in. She's going to look at it for you and she'll get back to you on that if it needs more detail. Councillor Tilbury, I think, was next.
Oh, thanks, Tony. Yeah, so certainly support Carolyn's suggestion regarding Serco and the house one. Certainly Serco. I've been with a meeting this morning where residents hadn't had their bins empty for 7 weeks because of issues with getting the trucks down there because they're apparently too large, despite the fact that they've been the same size for quite some time. And I need to come home to find they haven't actually done the estate I live in. So we've got some really smelly bins outside now, and because there must be an entire crew down. So there seem to be a lot of issues, and I'm picking them up in Whitchurch as well now, you know, these sort of long, where also there seems to be an issue where we're no longer collecting bins. We're making residents take their bins quite some distance because, you know, they can't access the smaller roads. And it seems to me that one of the issues that, you know, we changed all the routings about 1.5 years ago because it was apparently it was a bit haphazard. It's looking to me that the reason it was haphazard when Veolia did it is because they were using different sized trucks to access all the problem areas. And I think we've sort of done away with all that now. And of course, all we're now is starting to get to see all these other problems coming up. So I think that would be a good one. I think, and the social housing issue is an important one because we're not providing much social housing as our piddly little Kingston and Whitchurch Rural District Council were providing 50 years ago. You know, I mean, our supply of real affordable housing is abysmal, really. The other one is the Anvil and the Haymarket. You know, we're getting some very just before the elections, we had sort of letters in the Gazette saying, oh, you know, that responded to something that had come from the Anvil, which the leader and deputy leader responded to, but we'd not even seen this as councillors. But I think the important issue is they're cutting the grant to £400,000 a year. It used to be about, it was over £1 million when I first became a councillor. It had only been open 5 years. So what happened from the initial business plan, which didn't involve this council giving massive subsidies to what is basically a concert hall? How did we end up paying them £1 million a year, and you know, and now to the point where we're paying £400,000 a year? It seems to me that, you know, there was something wrong in the planning at the start that has led us to this situation where we're having to throw money at this, and probably will do for a long time. But it's also quite worrying. There seems to be, you know, the sort of implication that the people who are managing it aren't doing a good job. Well, you know, my experience of the people who've run it have been quite good. And, you know, when you consider the last two chairs of the were both former Conservative council leaders, you know, so we're talking about people who had a reasonable idea what they were doing and were reasonably competent. I think it's an area we need to understand what's going on here, because we gave them a contract 4 years ago. We went through all this at that time. We were into commission. We were going to become a commissioning council, and with the chief executive leaving, that seemed to go out the window. And that's, but you know, we seem to be still stuck in that sort of area where we're sort of trying to get them to do everything for less and less money. They should go and get grants from outside, but you know, where was, you know, I think the simple question is, where was the plan to run this when they built the blooming thing?
Ian, I think that what you're talking about, I think in general, I think a lot of people would agree. What we need to do is pin it down, and if you could fill in a form and to try,
I'll see if I can put something
and try and fill something in, so we know exactly what we're looking at.
Yeah.
You know, if we go too broad, we won't get any answers, if I'm honest, Ian. But if we can look at the funding side, we missed calling on that, I'm afraid. Otherwise, we could have called it in, but we've missed that. So we've just got to start asking questions. But if we can pin it down here, and if you can get one of those forms and submit that, and I'm more than happy to look at it, because it's a great asset in this town. What we don't want to do is lose it.
Yeah. I think it's about financial problems. We need to understand really what they are, because things aren't going to change. And the idea that they can go and get grants from other places, there are less grants. The Arts Council, all those sort of sources of funding. Hampshire have cut their funding completely. They all say what a great venue this is, but no one wants to pay for it other than the Basingstoke taxpayers. You know, and we can't afford it.
If you could do that, Ian, I think we can then move on to that, and that. I think that'd be quite an interesting one. I've got Councillor Mama Lady. I do struggle with your name. Hope I'm not.
You're not the only one, Chair. It's fine. Thank you for giving me the opportunity again. This is about upcoming discussions. I think the planning comes under this committee. Correct me if I'm wrong. For the planning, I would like to know the data about how much of enforcement is happening through proactively or by complaining by residents. So, you know, I would like to know that data. So, is it possible to get the data for the next scrutiny meeting, please?
Submit it to me.
I'll get out, back out now. Yeah, if you could submit that to the Democratic Services, and they'll be able to look at that and obviously get the officers to work on it, what you're after, and then it will be fed back into this committee. That's okay.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you very much.
I've got Councillor Faulkner.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just feeding in on the two items that have been mentioned. The 5 years I was on the performance panel, which was up until a year ago, every year in March, the Anvil Trust, the chairman and CEO, came to performance panel and had a 2-hour session presenting their business plan, etc., etc. So there was in place quite a good annual review of where we went through that plan. The thing that was less well understood was the policy at cabinet level. So it's like there's two different elements. How is the policies established as opposed to what we as Scrutiny were doing was monitoring the actual performance and understanding some of the issues which are quite significant. For instance, the Haymarket in particular, the number of booking where people have booked performances, etc., they suddenly drop out with a week to go. And that leaves the Anvil or the Haymarket with a huge loss. It's quite a difficult situation. And the one that came through the day, I had a very, very quick look at on the grass cutting from Councillor Wooldridge. I mean, that's a good area, but it needs thought because it's quite complicated. Just to give an input, where I am in a rural area, you've got a huge issue with sight lines on the A343, which is extremely dangerous. I used to get a lot of criticism about the verges not being cut, and they weren't. And then suddenly I'm getting, why have you cut them? They were beautiful. You know, it's like we're struggling to win on each count. So actually grass cutting is a bit more involved than I previously thought. So I would just input those two things. Going downstream, I might come up with something on the planning, because reading the report today, I think I must be the only councillor who has a problem. I've had a nightmare on the nitrate issue where fairly straightforward planning apps took over a year and some actually never got resolved because of the nitrate issue. And I've had, you know, in these performance indicators, it misses out issues like how many apps took more than a year to be considered, even though they were quite simple. But that I think that's for later in the year when things have settled down a bit more, because one thing that strikes me in looking at all these KPIs is we're right in the middle of a maelstrom and we don't really know where things are going because of the situation with COVID. But that's my input, Chair. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there any more questions or anything else to come up? Quite happy the way we're going at the moment and wait for the feedback. Yeah. Okay, well, we'll leave it at that. So that's the end of that item. We've got that is the end of the meeting, I'm afraid. It's been nice and short. I'd like to thank you all for bearing with me. I know it's not been easy on Zoom for me. Good job I've got the director sitting next to me. Hopefully next time we meet, it'll be in person. It should be a lot easier. If not, you know, a bit of a go at me. But thank you very much and good night.